Hey there, Drowsy Historian here. Tonight you're not a legend. You're not a silhouette on a museum wall or a footnote in someone else's empire. You're a Comanche warrior, living, breathing, sharpening your blade by firelight, while the prairie wind brushes past your face. You know the shape of every horizon. You speak with your hands, your horse, your silence. Your world doesn't need borders, only motion. And tonight, you ride at the height of what will someday be called a dynasty. Not that you'll ever call it that. You don't build monuments, you leave warnings. Before the fire burns out, and your name becomes a translation no one pronounces quite right, do me one small favour. Leave a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is. I love to know how far these stories carry, and if you want early access to more of these long, slow histories, ad-free audio of the episodes, or just want to support the show, you'll find the Patreon link in the description. But for now, lie back, get comfortable, let's begin. You don't remember your first breath, but you remember your first ride. Not the slow, awkward kind, where someone holds you upright and walks beside you. That came earlier, when your legs were still soft and your hands barely knew how to grip a mane. No, what you remember is the first time the horse moved under you, like part of your body, the moment your weight shifted forward and you leaned into the wind like you were made for it. Your heart beat so loud you thought it might fall out of your chest, but your mouth didn't open to scream. You didn't cry, you didn't laugh. You just held on and listened. Because the wind was saying something, and you wanted to understand it. You grew up in motion. That's the only way to say it. The land beneath your feet was always shifting, not because it changed, but because you never stayed in one place long enough for it to settle. You followed the herds, you chased the rains, you moved with the rhythm of the world, not against it. Trees were not landmarks, they were shadows that passed at the edge of your vision. Mountains were not destinations, they were things you skirted around. What mattered was the open, the space between, the rolling grass, the dry riverbeds, the endless sky that never once judged what you did beneath it. Your people do not think of the land as something to be owned. You do not fence it, shape it, or name it. You read it, you listen to it, you let it tell you where the buffalo have gone, where the ground is soft enough to dig, where the snakes warm themselves at dusk. The land has no voice, but it has signs. Bent grass, droppings still wet, feathers scattered from a kill. You learn to see without looking too long. You learn to hear without asking twice. And above it all, always, is the horse. To other people, it's an animal, a beast of burden, something to tie up or cage or breed like livestock. But to you, it's blood and breath and bond. You sleep beside it, talk to it, run your fingers along the ridge of its spine until it knows your scent better than your mother's arms ever did. You don't command it, you join with it. When you ride, it's not a choice, it's an extension of will. You don't think about the reins, you think about the wind, and the horse moves like it already knew your thought before you had it. The camp is your anchor, but never your prison. You grow up surrounded by sound, the low hum of speech in a language you haven't yet mastered, the crackle of fire over meat, the sharp rhythm of flint striking flint. Laughter comes easily. So does silence. You are loved, not in the way that people in cities write poems about, but in the way someone checks your arrow fletching without asking, or throws you a strip of dried meat when they think you're still too small to ask for it yourself. No one coddles you, but no one leaves you behind. You're taught early, not in words, but in motion. How to spot the ripple of grass that means something's hiding beneath. How to listen for bird song and know when it suddenly stops. How to feel the weight of your bow and know, just by instinct, if something is wrong with it. You learn to hunt. You learn to kill. You learn that sometimes surviving means not asking why. There is no ceremony when you first spill blood. No speeches. Just a nod from someone older, and the silent agreement that you now understand a little more about the world than you did yesterday. Pain is not hidden from you. It's handed to you like any other tool. You see bones set without flinching, see wounds cauterized without a scream. You know that hunger is a teacher, not a punishment. You know that cold is just another thing you learn to ride out. You do not pity yourself. You don't even know what that would mean. You're not waiting for rescue. You're waiting for the next thing that needs doing. You sleep to the sound of hooves. Not close, not far, just there. Constant, like breathing. You know the rhythm of each horse by its footfall. You know which ones are restless and which ones sleep standing. You fall asleep counting them, naming them, dreaming of the day you'll ride the fastest one into the horizon and not come back until the stars shift. By the time your voice deepens and your shoulders harden, you've already learned the most important lesson. Nothing is promised. Not the meat on the fire, not the sunrise, not even your name. Everything you are must be earned, and everything earned can still be taken. The world does not owe you anything. But if you ride hard enough, shoot straight enough, endure long enough, maybe, just maybe, it will let you keep what's yours for a little while. There's a rhythm to camp life, but it's not regular. It doesn't tick like a clock or follow a calendar. It swells and fades like wind across the grass, changing with the seasons, the game, the rumours. Some days you move before sunrise, striking camp while the shadows still stretch long and soft. Other days you linger for a while, a week, maybe two, waiting for someone's wound to close or a scout to return. There is no schedule, only necessity, and necessity is a better guide than any sun. The centre of the camp is never really the centre, it shifts. One day, it's the fire pit, where the old men sit and pass a pipe. Another day, it's the horse line, where girls braid manes and gossip in low voices. Trade happens constantly, but without ceremony. A length of cord for a scrap of meat, a knife for a story, a captured Spanish blanket for a necklace strung with the teeth of something dangerous. Nothing is written down, nothing needs to be. Everyone remembers what they're owed and who they'd rather forget. You don't speak more than necessary. That's not because you're cold or unfriendly. It's just that silence carries more weight than talk. If you sit beside someone and say nothing for an hour, that means something. It means trust, familiarity, shared history. Words are for outsiders, for children, for people who haven't learned to listen yet. A well-timed glance, a shift in posture, a single word dropped like a pebble. That's enough to steer a whole conversation if the other person knows how to catch it. At night, the world softens. The fire draws everything inward. Hides are stretched and stitched. Bones are carved into needles, into flutes, into little tokens that children will one day wear without knowing who first shaped them. The smell of meat mixes with the scent of smoke and horses and sweat. It's not unpleasant. It smells like continuity, like permanence, even though you know you might be gone by morning. Stories float through the air, half told and half true. Someone says they saw a white man get bucked clean off a mule. Someone else says they once raided a village so quietly the dogs didn't even bark. Nobody interrupts. You just listen and smile when the lies get too big to ignore. Your family isn't made of walls, it's made of presence. There are no locked rooms, no closed doors, no fixed addresses. Love looks different here. It's someone saving the choicest cut for you, without saying so. It's a sister who braids your hair before a raid and doesn't tell you she's worried. It's a father who corrects your shot with a nod and never praises you out loud. You don't need to say, "I love you," when the proof is in every action. You don't hold people tight, you ride with them. You eat with them. You bleed beside them. And when they die, you carry the silence they leave behind like a second shadow. There's a kind of pride that isn't loud. It doesn't wear feathers or paint unless there's a reason. It doesn't shout your name. It doesn't need to. You know what you've done. You know what your people can do. You've seen the way traders flinch when they realise who they're dealing with. You've seen the way settlers speak your name, like it's a storm. You've heard the stories, wild, warped, half true, about how Comanches ride faster than thought, how you can fire 6 arrows before a musket finishes its smoke. You don't need to correct them. Let them think what they want. Fear is a useful thing. It keeps the wrong people far away. But you also know the truth. You know how many days you've spent hungry, how many raids you've planned that never went the way they should have. You know the cost of every horse in your line. You know the names of every friend who didn't make it back. The empire doesn't feel like an empire when you're living inside it. It feels like work, like watching the sky for signs, like never letting your guard down, like sleeping with a knife near your hand and trusting the dog to bark before someone gets too close. And still, in the quiet between breaths, in the long silence that fills the plains after the fire burns low, there's a sense that you belong, that you are exactly where you're meant to be, that your people were shaped by this land, and this land knows their names. The sky has seen you. The wind has carried your sweat. The grass remembers your footsteps. And somewhere, just out of reach, is the echo of hooves, never fully gone, never truly silent. There's never been a day you weren't touching a horse, feeding it, brushing it, watching it move. It's the first thing you see in the morning and the last sound you hear before sleep. The shift of hooves in the dirt, the slow rhythm of breath, the occasional snort cutting through the stillness like punctuation. Your horse is not a pet, not a possession, not a beast of burden. It is a presence, a partner, the closest thing you'll ever have to a second self. Training starts early, not just for you, but for the horse. You run beside it, guide it with voice and hand, press your weight into its back before you can hold a bow steady. You learn its moods, the way others learn to read. You know when it's startled, when it's hungry, when it's about to bolt. And over time, it learns you too. The way you shift your hips to signal a turn, the way you tighten your legs before a sprint, the difference in your breath between caution and calm. You don't give it a name right away. Names come later, after something has been earned. A shared escape, a successful raid, a moment when you both saw death coming and turned your backs to it at the same time. Then maybe a name will come, something whispered, something just between the two of you. It doesn't need to be poetic, it just needs to fit. Speed matters, but speed alone isn't enough. You need balance, you need awareness. You need a horse that can stop on a whisper and pivot like its legs were tied with wind. You don't ride like the soldiers do, heavy and stiff, bouncing like sacks of flour. You ride low, flexible, always moving with the body beneath you. You can lean off one side and shoot under the horse's neck. You can turn in a heartbeat and fire behind you while galloping full speed. That's not magic. That's practice. Thousands of hours, bruised ribs, fallen pride. You've earned every seamless second. When you ride, the world narrows. There is only motion and intent. The plains stretch out in front of you, endless and open, and the wind doesn't push against you. It carries you. You feel the ground in your bones, each subtle change in elevation, telegraphed through your mount's legs into your spine. You don't think, you act, you don't steer, you suggest. And the horse answers as if it was always going to. Horses are wealth, but not in the way settlers mean. You don't count them like coins. You value them by memory. Which one carried your cousin home after he took an arrow to the leg? Which one outran the Texans? Which one gave birth to a foal that now belongs to your youngest brother? You trade them, yes, but you remember them. And when one dies, whether from age, sickness, or war, you bury it like kin. Not with ceremony, but with respect. You do not forget who carried you. Mounted warfare is not just skill, it's advantage. It's what lets a handful of your people strike fear into a force 5 times their size. You're faster, more precise. Your riders don't break ranks because there are no ranks. You don't march in lines. You move like smoke, impossible to grasp, impossible to predict. While others reload their muskets, you've already loosed another arrow. While they form into squares, you've vanished into the ravine, only to circle back from behind. But it's not just about killing. It's about seeing, From the back of a horse, the world changes. You see farther. You think farther. You can patrol the edges of a camp in minutes. You can chase buffalo, flank a wagon train, or vanish into tall grass before anyone even knows you are there. The horse doesn't just carry your body, it expands your reach. It makes you more than you could ever be alone. Still, not everyone bonds the same way. Some horses test you, some never quite sink. You've seen proud warriors thrown, dragged, even bitten. The connection isn't automatic, it has to be earned. And even then it can be broken. By fear, by pain, by one moment of hesitation at the wrong time. But when it holds, when you and the horse breathe in tandem, when you move like one being instead of two, that is a kind of power no steel or gunpowder can match. At night, you lie close to your horse. You wake before dawn, and the horse is already alert, already aware that you're awake. It waits for you, not with affection, but with readiness. You saddle up, not with haste, but with practiced calm. There's always another ride ahead. Always another journey, another hunt, another battle. But as long as your horse stands, so do you. You don't remember your first raid the way other people remember their first kill. There wasn't a speech, a celebration, or some triumphant yell into the wind. There was only tension, the kind that sits in your bones and keeps you from blinking too fast or breathing too loud. You didn't feel brave, you felt ready. There's a difference. Bravery is what others call it when they want to make a story out of survival. Readiness is simpler. You had your weapons, your horse, and the clear knowledge that failure meant you didn't come home. Now, after so many raids you've stopped counting, that readiness has turned into rhythm. You can feel the pulse of it before you even mount up. The camp is quiet, no laughter, no children's voices, no idle chatter, just the low murmurs of planning, the checking of straps and weapons, the soft snort of horses sensing something different in the air. You move with practiced silence, every step deliberate. You've done this before, you'll do it again, and you still might not come back. There is no fixed time for a raid, but night is often kinder. Darkness makes you harder to follow. The cold keeps your focus sharp. You ride in loose formation, never bunching, always watching. You trust the scout ahead to lead you around danger, the rider beside you to spot movement where you can't. You don't talk. You don't need to. Your presence is enough. The glint of a blade, the shift of weight in the saddle, the nod that says everything without saying anything at all. The target changes. Sometimes it's a rival band, sometimes a settler camp, sometimes a trade caravan carrying more than it should. You don't raid for sport, you raid for survival. Horses, tools, captives, goods, these are how you stay fed through winter, how you trade for powder, how you repay debts. The enemy thinks it's cruelty, but cruelty would be burning everything. You take only what you need, and sometimes a little more, just to remind them who you are. You move fast, that's what matters most. In and out before they organise a defence, before they fire back, before someone lights a signal or sends a runner. You know the layout before you strike, where the animals are kept, where the guards sleep, where the weak spots are. The sound of your horse's hooves is masked by the rush of your blood. You don't shout, you don't scream. You strike like weather, sudden and without warning. Captives are taken quickly. Women, children, sometimes young men, if they look strong enough to be useful. You know which ones will fight and which ones will freeze. Some scream, some don't. You don't enjoy it, but you don't hesitate either. Hesitation gets people killed. You watch their eyes, not for pity, but for danger. The eyes tell you who's too proud, who might cause trouble, who's likely to run. You treat them like animals at first, not out of cruelty, but out of caution. Trust is earned, not given. There's always a moment during the retreat, the flicker of uncertainty, when you expect ambush. When you wonder if someone stayed quiet, stayed hidden, stayed just long enough to strike you from behind. You keep your head low. You ride with your ears open, and you never assume it's over until you're 3 valleys away and no one's following. Sometimes you show mercy, an elder too frail to move, a child crying so hard they can't breathe, a woman who throws herself between you and another. You weigh the risks. Mercy is not weakness, it's calculation. Sometimes sparing one life now prevents more blood later, but not always. You've learned when to be kind, and when kindness is a luxury you can't afford. If you're wrong, people die. If you're right, they still might. Afterward, the camp receives you in silence. There are no songs, no dances, just the sound of people counting what came back. Horses led into the line, goods unpacked, captives fed and watched. You unsaddle your mount and wipe down your weapons. No one praises you. No one needs to. You're still alive. That's enough. You sleep with your knife tucked under your blanket and your bow within arm's reach. Not because you expect revenge, though it may come, but because habit is safer than hope. You don't regret what you did. You don't celebrate it either. It was necessary. And if fear keeps others from coming too close, from thinking too long about taking what's yours, then that fear has done its job. You've earned your silence. You've earned the space between attacks. You've earned the right to lie still and listen to your horse breathing beside you, knowing that somewhere out there, someone is telling a story about the night the Comanche came and didn't leave them anything but memory. You learn early that not all enemies look the same. Some wear metal and carry powder. Some smile and offer gifts with one hand while reaching for a map with the other. Some speak your language, badly but often, and still plan your death the moment you turn your back. Others don't speak at all. They just watch, wait, and come back with more next time. You don't hate them. That would require time. And you don't have much time to spare on feelings that don't help you stay alive. The Spaniards were the first to come with fire in their hands, muskets that spit smoke and iron, horses that once frightened your ancestors until they learned to ride them better than their riders ever did. The Spanish built their forts like they were trying to stake a claim in the wind. Neat lines, high walls, cannons pointing outward. But the walls couldn't stop hunger, and the cannons couldn't stop you from taking what you needed and leaving before anyone could light the fuse. You didn't fight them because they were foreign. You fought them because they were soft, because they brought things worth stealing. Saddles, iron tools, cloth that didn't tear, powder that sparked even in rain. Mexicans came later, but not differently enough. Some of them learned your ways, traded with you, intermarried, promised you treaties, land, peace. But promises are just wind without teeth, and their promises broke easily. They said they'd respect your borders. Then they built roads through them. They said they'd protect their settlements. Then they begged you for help when those settlements couldn't stand on their own. You raided them like you did anyone else, but something about the Mexicans always felt like they were trying to balance two faces at once. Neighbor and enemy, friend and target. You knew how to deal with them. You knew how to strike a bargain and how to burn it down if it turned against you. But it was never just about them, because not all your enemies came from across the border. Some lived much closer, the Kiowa, the Apache, the Cheyenne. Some you fought often, others less so. Some were enemies by tradition, others by fresh insult. And some, like the Kiowa, were both enemy and ally, depending on the month, the raid or the weather. You made peace with them more than once. You broke that peace just as often. It wasn't personal, it was survival. Territory shifts, resources thin, memories don't. There's a different kind of tension when you fight those who live like you. They know your tricks. They ride like you do, shoot like you do, plan like you do. That makes them dangerous, not because they're unfamiliar, but because they're too familiar. You know how far a man can ride without stopping. You know how fast a fire spreads when set in the right wind. You know how easy it is to disappear behind a ridge and come back from the other side. So when you face them, you prepare twice as hard, because you're not just fighting to win, you're fighting not to become the story they tell around their fires. And then there are the others, The pale men from the east, the ones who talk loud, smell of sweat and strange paper, and act like the land was waiting for them to arrive. They come in wagons, then on horseback, then with rifles that shoot more than once before the barrel cools. They talk about destiny like it's a weapon. They don't know your name, but they say it anyway. Wrong, mangled, flattened by their mouths. And still they come. More every season, building towns where there was once open plain, fencing land that doesn't belong to anyone, carving into the earth like they're digging up ghosts. You don't fight all of them. Some you trade with, some you avoid, some you test to see what kind of men they are, how long it takes them to fire, whether they flinch when you ride past, but they're different from the others. Not better, not worse, just hungrier. Their eyes stay empty, even when their hands are full. They treat your world like something they can fold up and carry home. You don't know how to fight that yet. Not with arrows, not with speed. So you watch, you ride, you remember. Because enemies don't always come with war cries and flags. Sometimes they come quietly, with laws, with fences, with slow deliberate growth. And when they finally move to take something, they act surprised when you push back, as if your resistance is the beginning, not the consequence. But you know better. You've seen too much to believe in their confusion. Every enemy bleeds. You remind yourself of that. Whether they come on horseback or behind a plough, whether they speak Spanish, Kiowa or English, they all have bodies, and bodies can be broken. But you also know the ones who wait, who plan, who multiply, who turn your world into numbers on a map, are harder to fight. You don't fear them. Not yet, but you're starting to wonder how many more are coming, and how long you can outride their shadow. Family means something different when it's not bound by walls or papers or names carved into stones. In your world, family is built in motion. It forms through shared firelight, through work, through survival. Blood matters, yes, but so does loyalty, silence and presence. And sometimes, the ones who weren't born into your circle are the ones who come to define it. The ones taken, the ones kept, the ones who stay. They blur the lines between kin and captive until the line disappears altogether. You've seen outsiders brought into camp in the middle of the night, faces bruised, hands bound, eyes darting like cornered animals. Women, children, sometimes young men, if they looked strong enough or useful enough. Some cried, some fought, some went quiet. Like their minds had already stepped somewhere else. At first, they're watched like threats, fed enough to survive, not enough to grow strong. They're given the bare minimum, food, water, shelter, but no welcome. Not until they show something more than fear. But time is strange, and it works on people the way rain works on stone. You've watched a girl taken from a burned-out farm grow into someone who moves, like she was born in the saddle. You've heard a boy who once only spoke Spanish start to curse in your language better than your cousin. Some learn because they must, others because they want to. You don't ask them why, you don't need to. The reasons are in their hands, in the way they begin to braid their hair differently, in the way they no longer look back when the camp moves on. Not all of them stay. Some are traded back, ransomed, exchanged, sent to families who barely recognise them. Others run when they get the chance, slipping away in the night and never returning. But the ones who do stay, the ones who find a place among you, they are no longer captives. They become something else. Not always fully trusted, not always fully equal, but not entirely other either. They belong to the in-between, to the space where memory and identity blur like the edge of a shadow. You've known women who are taken in raids and who now sit beside the fire, shelling seeds, laughing with their children. Some carry the trauma quietly, like a bruise they never speak of. Others harden, adapt, become part of the fabric. You don't pretend it's simple. You know what was done to them. You know what was asked of them. And yet, you've also seen women choose to stay even when they were offered a way out. Not because they were forced, but because there was nothing left for them beyond the horizon. Because what was once foreign became familiar. even if it never became kind. Children change the fastest. A child taken young enough forgets their first name, forgets the language of their birth, forgets the shape of their mother's face. They grow into your ways like grass in spring, naturally, without effort. They run beside your own, fight with them, eat with them, dream with them, and by the time they come of age, no one remembers they were ever from somewhere else. Except maybe their eyes. There's always something in the eyes, a shadow of memory, a question that never finds its words. Sometimes you look at them and wonder what they would have become if you hadn't taken them. A farmer, a priest, a soldier, or dead, maybe dead. And sometimes that thought comforts you. Other times it doesn't. You don't dwell on it long. There's work to do. The camp moves, the meat needs drying, the horses need tending. Morality is a luxury you were never offered. You've seen former enemies become brothers. A trader's son who once screamed when you rode into town now rides beside you with a knife on his belt and paint on his cheeks. A woman from a Pueblo village who once spat at her captors now raises a daughter who calls you uncle. These things happen slowly, then all at once. The world shifts, names change, and before long, no one remembers who started as what. But it doesn't always work. Some never adjust. Some hold on to their hatred, like a blade tucked beneath the tongue. They wait. They lash out. They disappear. And when that happens, you don't curse them. You just nod. Not everyone belongs. Not everyone heals. That's the price of living in a world built on force. Not every wound closes clean. Still, when you sit by the fire and look around, at faces brown and pale, at eyes shaped by dozens of bloodlines, at voices that carry words from half a dozen tongues, you realise something. You are not one people. You are many, stitched together not by ancestry, but by experience. Some came by birth, others by blade, but they stayed. And that, in the end, is what matters most. You were not born with your name. You were born with the potential to earn one. That's how it works among your people. Names aren't handed down like heirlooms or scrawled onto records. They're built in blood, in ash, in the echo of hoofbeats at dawn. Until then, you're just a child, one among many, called by a nickname, a description, a family tie. Something light, something temporary, something to hold your place in the world until you prove you deserve more. It happened after your fourth raid. The first few weren't much. You followed the older warriors, did what you were told, kept quiet, learned fast. You didn't kill anyone then. You watched, you gathered, you helped carry a stolen saddle back to camp and tried not to flinch when someone older joked about how clean your hands looked. But the fourth raid was different. That time, you acted without being told. You saw the settler boy running with a rifle, saw how he turned too slowly, how he slipped in the dirt. And you took your chance. You didn't hesitate. And when you rode back with the horse he'd been guarding, blood still on your knife, the others looked at you differently. They didn't name you that night. That would have been too easy, too rushed. They waited, watched, saw how you moved afterward, saw if it changed you. Some boys swell after a kill, others shrink. You didn't do either. You cleaned your blade. You said nothing. That was when the elders started speaking your name differently, no longer with teasing, but with weight. A few days later, a new name arrived, spoken by someone who didn't smile when they said it. A name tied to that moment, that act, that choice. Not poetic, not flattering, just real. And from that day on, it followed you. Names can be armour. People step differently when they know who you are. They speak softer. They offer you better horses. They watch you with half a thought behind their eyes. One part respect, one part caution. In a world without walls, reputation is the only shield you carry. It warns others not to cross you, not to test you, not to forget what you've done. But it's not always a blessing, because names also attract attention. You find yourself the first one picked when it's time to scout, the one called on when something goes wrong. You're no longer invisible, and sometimes that visibility makes you a target. Reputation is bait as much as it is defense. You know this when you catch someone younger watching you too closely. When they mimic the way you tie your sash or string your bow. When they laugh too hard at your jokes, then fall silent the moment you notice. You remember being that boy once. Remember looking at the warriors who seemed untouchable. Now you've become one of them, and it doesn't feel the way you thought it would. It's quieter, heavier, a kind of isolation wrapped in admiration. You keep your name by proving it again and again. One successful raid isn't enough. You ride farther, fight harder, speak less. You make your name echo, not just in your camp, but in the mouths of enemies. You want it to spread, not because of pride, but because fear buys time. If your name precedes you, maybe the next town will leave their horses outside the fence. Maybe the next trader will offer better goods without arguing. Maybe someone will hesitate, and in that hesitation, you'll find the space you need to stay alive. But sometimes late at night, when the fire burns low and the air is too still, you wonder if your name still means what it did. The camp has changed. The old warriors who once nodded in approval now sit apart, whispering about how things used to be. The younger ones ride faster, talk louder, chase glory like it's something they can hold. You hear your name used in stories, exaggerated, twisted, reshaped. In their mouths, your deeds become something else. You were there. You know the truth. But the truth is quieter than legend, and you're not sure anyone wants to hear it. You fear something you don't say out loud, that your people may forget what a name is supposed to be. Not just a mark of violence, not just a record of kills, but a weight, a responsibility, something earned with pain and kept with silence. You didn't take your name to be remembered. You took it so you could move through the world without explaining yourself. And now you hear it shouted by boys who haven't yet bled. Still, you carry it. You carry it in your step, in the way you ride, in the way you listen more than you speak. It's part of your shadow now. It follows you whether you want it to or not. And though you know it won't live forever, though one day even that name will be mispronounced or misremembered, for now it is yours. Not given, not borrowed, earned. Trade is not a kindness. It is not a gesture of peace. Trade, in your world, is a game played between people who know exactly how much they can take from each other without starting a war. You don't trade because you trust. You trade because it's efficient, because silver and bullets speak more clearly than promises, and because even in a life shaped by speed and silence, some things you can't make yourself. The Comancheros come from the north, half Spanish, half Mexican, half something else. Men with rough hands and smoother tongues, dressed in patched coats and wide hats that smell of sweat and tobacco. They bring tools, blankets, liquor, powder, lead, things you can't easily make, but need to keep the wheels turning. In return, you give them what only you can give. Horses, captives, buffalo hides, stolen goods with unfamiliar brands, still burned into the leather. It's not charity, it's an arrangement, one they benefit from just as much as you do. You don't shake hands or sign papers. You trade in the open air, with one hand near your weapon and one eye on their packs. You know they mark up every price, that the powder they bring is sometimes wet, the lead sometimes short. But you also know they'd never dare cheat you too openly. Not unless they wanted to vanish on the way home and never be spoken of again. Fear smooths out the worst of their lies, and greed keeps them coming back. Sometimes they bring gossip too. Word of a new governor in Santa Fe, a rumoured shipment of rifles bound for Texas, a priest who wants to civilize you if he can find a translator. You nod and let them talk, but you only listen for what matters. Which forts are weak, which towns are growing, which trails are unguarded. Information, like horses, is a kind of currency, and the right rumour, traded at the right time, is worth more than gold. Raiding and trading aren't opposites. They're part of the same system. One feeds the other. You take what you need in one season, then convert it into what you can't steal in the next. A captured woman becomes a bargaining chip. A wagon full of tools becomes a season's worth of tobacco and cloth. A raid's success isn't just in how many survived, it's in how much can be turned into something else, something useful, something tangible. That's the economy of the plains. Not coins, not ledgers, just movement and exchange. Sometimes you find yourself inside one of their settlements, not as a raider, but as a guest, a trading partner. You walk the narrow streets with dust on your boots and tension in your shoulders, watching walls close in like cliffs on either side. You don't like the way the buildings lean over you, how you can't see the horizon from here, how the air smells more of waste than wind. It's not that it's unfamiliar, it's that it feels wrong, like a trap with too many doors. You see women sweeping stone steps, children playing with wooden toys, men arguing in doorways about prices and God. There's a softness to it, a slowness, the kind that comes from not having to move, not having to worry if the land will feed you this year. And sometimes you catch yourself wondering, not out of envy, but out of curiosity, what it would be like to live in such stillness. To grow old in one place, to walk the same path so many times it wears smooth under your feet. But you know what that softness costs. You've seen it, in the way their men hesitate, in how quickly they panic when the threat comes from outside their walls, in how they look at you, not just with fear, but with confusion, as if they can't understand how you survive without roofs, without fences, without clocks. They build their safety out of stone and ceremony. You build yours out of speed and silence. You know which one lasts longer. You take what you need from them, then leave. Always. You trade, you nod, you ride. You don't stay long enough to get comfortable. Because comfort dulls the senses. Because permanence is a lie. Because even if their towns look solid, even if their ledgers are full and their walls are high, they can't run when the fire comes. You can. That's the difference. That's the advantage. And you're not ready to trade that for anything. Still, when you tie the goods to your saddle and ride back toward the open plain, there's a moment, brief, weightless, where you feel the strangeness of it all. That your world and theirs run parallel, touching just long enough to trade flesh for powder, silence for silver, and then you vanish into the wind again, your goods jingling, your horse steady, your eyes fixed forward, because you know the next raid is coming, and trade, like everything else, only matters if you survive long enough to make it again. The year without water doesn't start with fire, it starts with silence. The rivers run lower than they should. The grass doesn't bounce back after grazing. The mud along the banks cracks too soon, and when you press your ear to the wind, there's no answer, no promise of storm, no hint of change, just heat, slow, steady, patient. You don't panic, not at first. Drought is part of the cycle. The land always tests you. The trick is knowing when it's just a test, and when it's a reckoning. By mid-season, the buffalo are harder to find. The herds move farther than they should. Deeper into country, you'd rather not ride. The horses grow thin despite your best efforts. Their ribs beginning to show even with shortened runs and water hauled in skins. You butcher more often, but there's less meat to go around. Children eat the broth before the bones have time to soften. The old ones say it's happened before, that the land always returns to balance, but their eyes are darker than their words. Then sickness arrives, first in the horses, a cough, a stumble, a stiffness that doesn't go away, then in the camp, people too weak to ride, too dizzy to sit upright. No blood, no violence, just bodies slowing down, one by one. You've always known how to fight an enemy with weapons, but there's nothing to shoot at when it's the wind itself that seems to turn against you. You raid because you have to. There's no pride in it. No time for ritual or trophies. It's not about proving strength. It's about filling bellies before they shrink too far. You target settlements, not because they're enemies, but because they have grain, or goats, or anything not shriveled by heat. You take faster than you used to. Fewer captives, fewer horses. Just what can be carried, eaten, traded. You move in smaller groups. Easier to feed, easier to hide. And if someone doesn't come back, there's no mourning. Just silence, the kind that waits to see who's next. Other bands are hurting too. You meet them at distance. Kiowa, Apache, sometimes your own cousins from farther north, and you exchange glances before weapons. Nobody wants a fight. Not when the real enemy is the sky. Some groups travel together for a while, sharing spoils, splitting trails, temporary peace, shaped by necessity. It won't last, but for now, it's something. The camp shifts tone. The laughter is quieter, the nights shorter, the fires smaller. You ration salt, chew leather, boil roots you never trusted before. You see mothers tear pieces from their own clothing to wrap a child's swollen feet. You see proud men ride out in silence and come back with nothing, or not at all. Your horse grows restless, you sleep less, you talk even less than before, which once seemed impossible. The empire doesn't fall, it wavers, it bends, like a tree that leans under too much wind. You still hold territory, you still raid, you still ride faster and fight smarter than anyone who dares cross you. But now you feel the edge of something, uncertainty perhaps, or the faint crack of pressure in the foundation. Not because you're weaker, you're not, but because the world is changing in ways you can't control. Settlements are growing larger, not fewer. Roads spread like vines, cutting through land that used to be wild. The white men come with wagons and fences and written documents. They wave like weapons. They don't just want what you have, they want to reshape where you live. Not burn it, not conquer it, just tame it. And somehow that's worse, because you know how to fight an enemy with a rifle. You don't know how to fight one with a deed and a plough, and yet you endure. You always have. The drought breaks eventually, not with a flood, but with a slow return to moisture. One rain, then another. You don't celebrate, you don't trust it yet, but the animals drink deeper. The ground holds less dust, and people begin to hope again. Not out loud, but in the way they stand straighter, the way they take longer with the cooking pot, the way the children begin to argue again. Still, something lingers, a knowing. That survival is not the same as thriving. That endurance has a cost, and that even the strongest horse, the sharpest rider, the fastest bow, all of it means less if the land stops listening to you. You survived the year without water, but something in you shifted with the soil. A small fracture, a quiet truth. The world will not wait for you to catch up. You hear about them before you ever see them. Whispers on the wind, stories traded at night, of men with strange accents and maps they carry like weapons, of endless wagons pulled by beasts too slow to flee, but too stubborn to stop. They're coming from the east, they say. Whole towns packed into canvas-covered trails, rolling west like a slow-moving flood. First it's a trickle, then a stream, then a surge. The Americans. They don't come with war cries, they come with papers, flags, shovels. They build forts in places your horses once grazed, stack wood, hammer nails, plant crops. They don't ask, they claim. Not with fire and blood at first, but with confidence, the kind that only comes from not knowing how much danger they're in. You watch them from a ridge one day, their wagons stretched like bones across the horizon. Children laughing beside oxen, rifles slung low. They don't ride like you. They don't watch their backs. They don't move like people who've ever had to earn their right to survive. At first they try to treat with you, or with whoever they can get to sit still long enough to sign something. They bring gifts wrapped in words, rifles, tobacco, cheap beads, folded blankets that carry the smell of damp storage and someone else's sweat. They offer food too, salt pork, flour, things that rot your teeth and slow your step. Some call it generosity. You call it bait. Treaties are spoken in English, written in script no one asked you to understand, then delivered with smiles that vanish the moment you push back. They don't remember the last time you burned a fort. They don't remember how fast your horses can move, how quiet your arrows land. Or maybe they do, but choose to forget. That's the thing with them. Their memory is short, but their appetite is long. They act like they discovered the land, even as they walk on trails carved by your ancestors, even as they build over bones they never learned to recognize. Some of them bring religion, others bring whiskey. Both are dangerous in their own ways. The first offers salvation, the second, forgetfulness. You don't need either. What you need is space. What you need is for them to stop planting fences like they're sewing the earth shut. But they don't stop. Each year, there are more. Settlers, soldiers, missionaries, surveyors with brass tools who measure the world like it belongs to them. You raid sometimes, just to remind them. You take their horses, their powder, whatever else they were foolish enough to leave unguarded. Sometimes you send them running back to their forts with blood on their boots and fear in their eyes. And sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes they fight back harder than expected. Sometimes they've already dug trenches, reinforced their wagons, hired scouts who once rode under your flag, but changed sides for coin. The worst part isn't that they're stronger. They're not yet. It's that they don't stop. When you kill 10, 20 come after. When you burn one fort, they build 2 more farther west. You don't understand how they keep coming, where they all come from. It's like they never run out of men, or nails, or reasons. And that's when it hits you. You're not fighting a tribe. You're not fighting a nation. You're fighting an idea. One that moves without horses. One that writes its victories in ink long before the battle begins. You hear stories of other tribes being forced westward, squeezed into tighter lands, pushed up against each other, like cattle in a pen. Some come to you looking for alliance. Others bring nothing but warning. The treaties they signed didn't hold. The promises were buried under roads. You don't need the warning. You've seen enough to know where this leads. And yet, they still try to speak with you. The Americans. They send emissaries, officers, sometimes even men, who claim to understand your ways. They sit in circles and make their speeches. They ask what you want. As if this land wasn't already your answer. As if you haven't already bled enough to explain it. You tell them what they already know. You want to be left alone. They nod, take notes, smile again. And then they go back to their forts, their maps, their wagons. Your elders begin to argue. Some say it's time to adapt, to take what you can and hold what you must. Others say to fight harder, ride farther, never stop pushing back. But you're not sure either answer is enough. Because the Americans are coming not for one raid or one war or one treaty. They're coming forever. That's the difference. You live in seasons, they live in expansion. And you feel it now, not just on the wind, but in your bones. Something is changing. The world does not bend to the horse as easily as it once did. The empire still rides, but the trails are narrowing, the fences spreading, the memory of your people already being reshaped into something that fits more neatly into their books. It starts like most battles do, with confidence, not arrogance, just that steady, familiar feeling that comes from knowing the land better than your enemies ever will. You've ridden every ridge in this stretch of country. You know where the earth rises in just the right way to shield a line of archers, where the dry creek bed twists and opens into ambush. You've mapped this place with your eyes, your breath, your hooves, and so when word comes that a column of rangers is cutting through, maybe 20, maybe more, you gather your brothers and ride out without hesitation. You spot them at dawn, a long line on the move, men dressed in coats that don't match, their hats too stiff, their eyes too bright. They don't know how to move quiet. They crunch every stone, spook every bird. You watch from above and wait. Let them ride deeper. Let them forget to be afraid. You've done this before. Surprise, scatter, vanish. Hit them hard and fast. Take their mounts. their gear, their pride, then melt back into the hills before they can blink. You expect it to be the same, but it's not the same. You descend with precision. Arrows first, followed by war cries sharp enough to split bone. You strike from the flanks, from behind, from places no man on foot should be able to reach in time. And at first it works. They scatter, a few fall. You see confusion in their ranks, panic in their horses. But then something shifts. They regroup too fast. They fall into a tight knot, rifles aimed outward, moving in practiced rhythm. They've done this before too, more times than you expected. You realise it just a second too late. These aren't green recruits. These are seasoned men, armed with new rifles that shoot faster than you can count, with revolvers that don't need reloading between every shot. They know how to wait. They know how to bleed without breaking. You were ready for a skirmish. They came ready for war. The fight drags longer than it should. You lose 2 men in the first charge. One falls beside you without a sound. The shaft of an arrow sticking out of his thigh. Friendly fire maybe, or worse, his own weapon turned against him. Another takes a bullet through the shoulder and keeps riding until he collapses near the ravine, dust covering his face like a burial shroud. You keep going. You can't stop. Not yet. Your horse saves your life more than once, dodging, turning, leaping through gunfire like it understands every thought you haven't had time to speak. You feel the rhythm of the battle through your legs, every jolt, every missed shot, every heartbeat shared between you and the animal beneath you, until it's gone. The shot comes from somewhere you didn't see, a crack louder than the rest. Your horse stumbles mid-gallop, legs folding beneath it, in a collapse so sudden it throws you forward. You hit the ground hard, shoulder first, breath knocked out of you like a stolen word. You try to rise, but your legs won't answer. You can't hear anything except the pounding in your ears and the distant, awful sound of your horse thrashing in the dirt. You crawl to it, bleeding from your side, and find its eyes wide, mouth foaming. It tries to stand, fails, tries again, then stops. You bury the blade just behind its jaw, quick, final. You don't say anything, there's nothing to say. You just rise, somehow, and limp toward the sound of battle. You fight the rest on foot. It's slower, harder. You're used to being faster than them, smarter, untouchable. Now you're ducking behind rocks, crawling through dust, listening for the click of a hammer instead of the whistle of the wind. You see your brothers falling one by one. Some retreat, some die trying not to. The line breaks, reforms, breaks again. There's no victory here, only moments, brief, sharp, where survival pretends to look like winning. By nightfall, it's over. You're alive, but not whole. You've lost too much to call this a success. The rangers pull back eventually, dragging their wounded, leaving behind broken packs, burnt out fires, blood in the sand. You collect the bodies you can, wrap them in what cloth you have. The rest, you mark the place with stone, so at least you'll know where they fell. So someone will. You ride back on a borrowed horse, slower, quieter. Every bounce is pain, but it's not the worst part. The worst part is knowing you didn't lose because you were careless or weak. You did everything right, and it wasn't enough. They had more men, more bullets, better maps. They weren't better than you, just newer, heavier, more constant, and they'll come again. You come back thinner than you left, not just in body, though there are bruises where flesh used to be, a tightness in your ribs that wasn't there before. It's your shadow that feels smaller, your sound. You ride into camp without the usual noise, no scattered dogs barking, no children pointing, no elders rising to greet returning warriors. Just a quiet recognition, a few steps forward, a few nods. Then stillness. There are fewer of you now. You count the riders behind you, and the count stops too soon. The ones who didn't make it back aren't spoken of immediately. Their names linger at the edge of every conversation, like smoke that hasn't yet cleared. Later the stories will come, the retellings, the he was brave, the he died well. But not yet. For now, the camp absorbs the silence the way dry ground takes in blood, without ceremony, without resistance. The elders speak in low tones near the fires, not about defeat, that word doesn't live easily in their mouths, but about change, about timing and the shape of things. They say less than they mean. They always have, but you can feel the weight in their words, the tension in their voices. They're afraid. Not of the enemy, not exactly. They're afraid of momentum, of what comes next, of how many more raids will end like this one. The younger men don't seem to hear it, or don't want to. They talk loudly, as if to push the silence away. They speak of the fight as a test, not of survival, but of manhood. They talk of the rush, the speed, the bullets whistling past. One of them compares it to hunting buffalo. You look at him too long, and he drops his eyes. He hasn't yet lost a friend whose name he can't say without feeling like something inside him cracked. You don't argue with them. You don't scold. Let them have their noise. Let them feel like thunder still belongs to them. They haven't seen what you've seen. Not just the blood, but the edges, the outlines of things. The way fear used to cling to the air when your riders approached. The way that fear has faded. People still respect the Comanche name, but now it's laced with challenge, not dread. They're not running anymore. They're bracing. You remember the old days, not with nostalgia. You don't romanticize pain, but with clarity. When your name meant retreat. When even the soldiers in polished uniforms kept their hands on their guns when you rode into sight. When traders overpaid just to keep your attention off their pack mules. When your horse's shadow was enough to silence a village. That wasn't magic. That was work. That was power earned through motion, through precision, through ruthlessness, honed into survival. Now you see hesitation, not in your own people. In the world, the fear you relied on is still there, but thinner, stretched, questioned. The settlers are bolder, the soldiers less patient. The maps grow thicker, with more roads, more forts, more names you didn't approve and don't care to learn. You were once the storm. Now they're learning how to ride it out, how to wait, how to outlast. You don't say this out loud, not yet, but the knowledge sits behind your teeth like something sour. You watch your people repair saddles, dry meat, teach children to string bows, all the rituals of strength, all the motions of resilience, and you wonder how long it can hold. Not because you doubt their will, but because will isn't always enough when the ground itself shifts under you. At night, when the fire burns low, you find yourself awake more often. Not from pain, not even from memory, just from awareness. A tightness in your chest, a thought that doesn't shape itself into words. You stare at the sky and it doesn't feel quite as wide anymore. You listen for hooves in the distance, not out of fear, but habit. And when you close your eyes, you hear thunder, not real, but remembered. The kind that used to follow you wherever you went. People still look at you with respect, but it's starting to feel like the kind reserved for stories, for figures remembered more than followed. A child asks your name the other day. You tell them. They blink, unsure. You realise they've only heard it in stories from someone else's mouth. You're not offended, but the realisation cuts sharper than you expected. The world you rode through is changing, and you are not its centre anymore. You are its shadow, its echo, a ghost of thunder in a sky growing quieter by the season. You still ride, you still fight, but some part of you knows, the part that listens when everyone else talks, that the storm is passing. And once it's gone, the land will remember you, not by your name, but by the space you once took up and the silence you left behind. Old age was never promised to you. You grew up expecting to die with a weapon in your hand, not a blanket over your knees. Most don't last this long. A good death is supposed to come fast. A clean arrow, a lucky bullet, a horse collapsing under you mid-charge. That was how it always seemed. Quick, earned, honourable. But you've outlived most of the men you used to ride beside. Not because you were the strongest, not because you were the smartest, just because you were careful and lucky and didn't stop moving when you should have. Now the camp moves without you. Not entirely, not yet, but enough that your absence no longer feels like a gap. You ride less, mostly short distances. You feel the way your knees creak when you mount up, the way your fingers don't grip the reins the same. The horse knows too. It adjusts, walks slower, waits longer before breaking into a trot. You tell yourself you still ride well, and you do, but it's not the kind of riding that makes enemies flinch. It's the kind that makes children watch curiously, like they're wondering if they'll be you someday, or if that time is already gone. You speak more than you used to. That's one of the trade-offs. The body grows slower. The tongue grows sharper. You sit near the fire with the other old ones, passing the hours with small words and long silences. Sometimes you tell stories, real ones, not the kind with monsters and miracles, but the kind that begin with dust and end with blood. The kind the young ones say they want to hear, until they do. Then they grow quiet, shift their weight, look away. They want tales of glory, not hunger. They want to be legends, not survivors. You dream more now, not because you're soft, not because the past clings to you like smoke, just because dreams come easier when your body rests more than it moves. Some nights you dream of battles, not the chaos, not the blood, just the rhythm, the feel of the wind against your face, the twitch of the horse beneath you as it senses something before you do. Other nights you dream of names, people you haven't seen in decades, people who didn't come back. You remember their laughs better than their faces now. That's how time plays with you. It leaves the weight but softens the edges. The land feels smaller now, not because it is, but because you've seen so much of it, ridden across every corner, returned to places that once felt endless, only to find them changed. There are fences now where there were once open plains. Wagon tracks scar the hills. Settler towns swell like boils, replacing grass with stone, song with smoke. You ride past these places and feel something tighten in your chest. Not rage, not even sorrow. Just absence. Something was here. Now it's not. And no one seems to notice except you. Sometimes you sit on a rise and look out over the horizon and realise you've been there before. Not just physically, but in thought, in memory. You've watched so many sunsets, they no longer impress, and yet you still watch them, hoping they'll remind you of something you've forgotten, some small truth, some answer to a question you didn't know you were asking. Your bones ache more in the cold. Your sleep is lighter. You start to carry things in your mind you never used to. Faces, smells, fragments of songs sung by voices now gone. You begin to understand what the old ones meant when they said the land remembers. It's not poetic, it's practical. The land keeps track of footsteps, of battles, of bodies buried shallow beneath it. And it holds those memories longer than you ever could. You've earned this age. It wasn't given. You paid for it with time and blood and silence. And still sometimes, you wonder what it's worth. This long view from the quiet hill. This knowledge that no one asks for. But then a child runs past laughing, or someone offers you the first piece of meat from the fire. And you remember that even if the world forgets, your people haven't. Not completely. Not yet. You've heard it said often by outsiders that empires are things built with gold and stone. They talk about kings and castles, borders etched in ink, armies in matching uniforms. But that's not what empire was to you. You didn't build monuments. You didn't wear crowns. You rode. You fought. You survived. And in doing so, you became something larger than yourself. Not a symbol, not a footnote, but a moving force that shaped everything around it. You were not standing outside of history. You were the one writing it, hoofprint by hoofprint, whether anyone cared to admit it or not. There are those who would call you a raider, a thief, a killer, and they're not wrong. You've done all those things. You took horses, goods, people. You burned what couldn't be carried. You cut down men who stood in your way and you didn't look back. But it wasn't cruelty that drove you. It was structure, survival, purpose. You were a part of something greater, a way of life that demanded strength, speed, clarity. If you hesitated, you died. If you asked too many questions, someone else took what should have been yours. Morality was not your guide. Necessity was. You didn't spill blood for sport. You spilled it because it was the currency of your time. Because the world you inherited didn't offer safe paths, only dangerous ones you were expected to master. You can still remember the first time you cut a man down, the way the moment stretched and broke like old leather, the heat, the silence after. You didn't feel proud. You didn't feel broken. You just felt awake, like a door had opened and something had stepped through that could never step back. You lived in a system that rewarded ferocity, but also discipline. You were taught that a warrior isn't just a killer. A warrior is someone who understands when not to strike, when to wait, when to leave something untouched. You've spared lives, you've shown mercy. Not because you were soft, but because you understood the cost of every wound. But those moments don't make you innocent. They just make you complicated, and that's the truth no one wants to hear. People want to sort the past into clean piles. Villains and victims, civilization and savagery. But you've never fit in either hand. You raided villages and rescued children. You took captives and raised them as your own. You brought war to strangers and fed your own with the spoils. There were nights you sang with your brothers under the stars, and nights you buried them with your own hands, dirt mixing with blood. You've held infants and weapons, dreams and regrets, all in the same day. If there was cruelty in your actions, it was mirrored by the world around you. The Americans came with ink and iron. The Mexicans came with treaties that withered like dry leaves. The Spanish came with crosses in one hand and shackles in the other. None of them arrived with clean hands, and yet they speak as if you were the only one with blood under your nails. You don't ask for forgiveness. You wouldn't know what to do with it if it came. Forgiveness is for those who regret. You don't regret what you did. You understand it. You carried out your part in the storm. You kept your people alive. You bought time with bone and fire. And even now, as the world grows quiet and smaller around you, you know it was not for nothing. You remember the names of those who rode beside you, the way they laughed, the way they fell. You carry them like stones in your chest, not as shame, but as truth. You speak of them sometimes, not loudly, not often, but when you do, you speak plainly. They were not saints, but they were yours, and they mattered. The empire is fading. You know that now. The ground no longer sings when you ride across it. The sky feels heavier, the trails more crowded, but that does not erase what was. You were not a whisper. You were a thunderclap. You changed the shape of things. The maps will try to forget you. The books will misname you. But the land remembers. The scars are still there, etched into the plains, like fingerprints. If someone asks you who you were, you don't give them the stories made for tourists. You don't reduce yourself to myth. You say it clear. You were the Comanche. You rode like the wind. You took what you needed. You paid what it cost. You lived without apology. And if they want to understand you, they'll have to step outside their tidy histories and into the dust. You were the empire, not perfect, not eternal, but real. You sit beside the fire one last time, not for warmth, but for memory. The heat doesn't reach your bones like it used to. Your hands are still strong, but quieter now. The callus is dulled, the grip slower to close. The horse you ride these days is gentler, older, like you. It doesn't flinch at shadows. It doesn't chase the wind. It walks with the knowledge that some journeys are not measured in distance. You think about your name, not just the one you earned, but the others that followed it. The whispered ones. The ones spoken in fear or pride or confusion. Some called you a ghost, some a warlord. Some tried to fit you into their stories without ever asking who you were. But your name was never theirs to define. It was shaped by hooves, by scars, by choices. And now, Slowly, it begins to lift from your shoulders, as all names do in time, not erased, just returned to the earth. You think about the horse you lost, the one that carried you through your fiercest years, the one buried under a tree whose roots now clutch the memory of its heartbeat. You think about the raids, the trails, the thunder that once followed your every step. It's quieter now. The camp still lives, the children still laugh, but they speak of you in the past tense, even when you're standing in front of them. That's how stories begin, not with a death, but with a distance. You don't fear what's coming. You've faced too much to flinch now. You know your time has passed, and that's not a failure. It's just a truth. The empire you helped shape is folding into history. Not gone, not yet, but softening. And you're ready to let go of the weight, the pride, the ache. You don't need the fire anymore. You don't need to be seen. The land remembers more than the books ever will. It remembers your voice, your footfall, your breath in the cold morning air. It remembers the horse beneath you and the war you carried in your chest. And now, as the last light fades and the wind rises again, it begins to carry you home. Not as a legend, not as a warning, just as a whisper, just as a rider fading into dusk. That brings us to the end of tonight's story. Not a final chapter, just a quiet fading into wind and memory. If you're still here, thank you for riding beside me through the dust. History isn't always written in ink or stone. Sometimes it's carried in the breath of horses, the names spoken around fires, the footsteps worn into soil that no one maps anymore. If you'd like early access to future stories, ad-free audio of the episodes, or just want to support the show, you'll find a link to the Patreon in the description. You can also like, subscribe, or leave a comment if there's a part of the past you'd like to see remembered next. Sleep well